Hi there, it's Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, Worldwide TV Network, I-2247 out of Franklin, Tennessee, iHeart Radio, Talk for Media, TV, radio, and podcasting, and all other platforms around the world. And you know what? This is a special day because this is Martin Luther King Jr.'s, the day we celebrate for him. So this young lady, who I haven't met before, took time out to come on Movie Reviews and More. So I have to read this from one of my co-hosts because she couldn't make it today. And she goes, Ms. Edwina Martin, what an honor it is for us to have you taken the time out of your busy schedule to visit Brian Sebastian and all of us at Movie Reviews and More, especially on this day as so many of us honor and reflect on the great Martin Luther King Jr. You are a lady I admire and hold in very high esteem, and as King himself said, injustice everywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The time is right to do what is right. Your many accomplishments has shown that this philosophy is the centerpiece of where you are today. That's true. And for that, I honor you today as well. Thank you for being a role model and an icon for creating justice and greater equality. God bless you, and I look forward to being with Brian on a future visit with you. Sincerest regards, Sherry Nelson said that. Now, she wouldn't want me to say that, but I have to say that because we have that. She adores not only you, but your husband, Mickey.
I'm so really flabbergasted. Those words are so kind, and I so appreciate them. And I thank you, Brian, for inviting me to be on your show today, because you have many illustrious people, and I'm really just a regular person.
No, that can't be the case. No, I don't believe that. If you're married to Mickey Burns, no
really
way. No way. It takes a strong woman to make that guy great. It takes a strong woman to make that man even greater.
I'm going to have to pass the kind words along to Mickey as well. MLK Day is a very special day, though. So it's really meaningful for me to be able to share a little of my story and what I do now with you today.
Talk about what this day means to you, and then talk about where you are in your career. How did you start? Because there's some people that may not know your history of what you've done.
Oh my goodness, talk a little bit about me. Well, I'm a lawyer. That is what drew me to New York. I went to NYU Law School, and I went there because their motto was a private institution in the public service. My siblings and I were raised by parents who were very much children of the civil rights movement. And they raised us to believe that there's no higher calling than helping other people. And they drummed into us really the importance of leaving the world in a better place than we came into it in. And so we all take it very seriously, and I definitely do. After leaving law school, I got excellent training in private practice. I was at a big firm, Sherman and Sterling. I went to a medium-sized firm, and I actually spent a few years in a small majority Black law firm in Harlem. It was called Van Leeuwen Burns and Bassett. Unfortunately, no longer lasts today, but that was an incredible experience as well. We were in a brownstone in Harlem. I was actually on the 4th floor, and there was no elevator, so I didn't have to go to the gym anymore because I was running up and down the stairs literally all day, carrying heavy books, carrying my briefcase. So I got great exercise as well as amazing training in different areas of law and all of these different experiences. But there was something missing for me through it all, because I could do as much pro bono work as I wanted to. All the firms that I was at encouraged it, particularly Sherman and Van Leeuwen Burns and Bassett. And I had the honor to work on sports cases, on entertainment cases. but also to do family court work for victims of domestic violence, as well as work on death penalty advocacy cases as well, which were probably the hardest thing that I worked on. And it was satisfying to be able to spend some time doing pro bono work. I found that for me, it wasn't enough. That, you know, for me to feel really satisfied, I had to feel that my bottom line was the public good. So I was very lucky in meeting Andrew Scheer, who was the president of Legal Services NYC for a number of years, through a friend from law school, Haley Gorenberg, who's been a wonderful cherished friend for years. And I ended up becoming the first director of communications at this legal services organization. Now, there are legal services programs around the country, because I imagine you have people from around the country listening. And what they do is they provide, they're funded by the Legal Services Corporation, and they have other sources of funding, but they're funded by the Legal Services Corporation, which is a federal entity to provide free civil legal services to low-income people in areas such as housing. Now, as you can imagine, how many people do you think are looking for housing help right now, Brian?
Oh my
In the
God.
midst of everyone losing their jobs, not everyone, but so many people, the unemployment numbers going through the roof. Legal services programs are no doubt receiving a number of calls, and I want to urge everyone who is listening to, if they have housing, if they have public benefits issues, if they are in a domestic violence situation, go to the Legal Services Corporation website. And on that website, you will find one of their grantees in your area and call them up. They provide high quality legal work, and they save people's lives. When you save someone's housing, when you help them get out of a dangerous situation, when you help them either get into a special education circumstance that they should be in, or that if they are gifted and talented, that they get into those programs as well. We all know education is the key to success in our society. So that's my, I guess, PSA. And I was at Legal Services for a number of years. It was through working at Legal Services that I met New York City Councilwoman Debi Rose. She became the first African-American, first person of color elected to office on Staten Island.
Wow.
If you ever hear about Staten Island in the news, you know it tends to have a conservative bent. So Ms. Rose, being able to become elected, she had to create, you know, what I call an Obama coalition, right? People of color and progressive white people coming together to work towards this momentous occasion. And she's in her last year of her third term in the city council. She's term limited and can't run again. But early on, when I was at Legal Services, I moved to Staten Island at that time. And I saw immediately that we didn't have a legal services program on Staten Island.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, you know, I mean, yes, there were other programs in New York City, but to not have an office on Staten Island, I thought was a glaring hole. It's the fastest growing, it's the smallest borough in New York City, but we're still the size of Atlanta. Yeah. And deserved our own program. So I advocated for and coordinated the efforts to open Staten Island Legal Services, which opened in the mid-2000s, and I'm so proud to say, you know, now has up to 40 lawyers, I believe, or 40 staff anyway. When we opened it, it was with 4 staff because that's the budget that we had at that time. And they're serving thousands of Staten Islanders every year. So I'm so sort of proud and excited to see what that's been able to grow into. in doing that process, I met with community leaders on Staten Island to do a needs assessment of where the holes were in sort of service delivery on the island. And that's how I met Councilwoman Rose. We were instantly like best friends. And we just became friends and stayed in touch from that one meeting. Because, you know, sometimes you know when you meet someone that you have so much in common with. When she was finally elected, and she ran 3 times before she was, I reached out to her and I said, I would love to work for you, but she didn't have any opening on her staff at that time. When she did finally have an opening for something I was interested in, which was her legislative director, I jumped at the chance to go and work for her in the New York City Council. And it has just been such a blessing in my life to work for this incredible woman and be able to serve the people of Staten Island and New York City. And I like to think that for the 7 years that I worked with her, I brought to bear sort of my legal experience in helping in crafting legislation. There were so many important pieces of legislation that Councilwoman Rose worked on. One of the first ones we worked on together was a disability rights piece of legislation. And that sort of comes from my days when I was in law school and I was chair of the Disability Advocacy Committee at NYU Law School. And we helped move the law school to build a ramp in the front of the school so that people with mobility challenges didn't have to go in a side elevator and go to the basement and then come up from there, which was the case when I went there. So if you ever go by NYU Law School, you'll see like a beautiful ramp. They did way more than they needed to, but now it's a beautiful space and sort of a hangout space for the students. And I look at that and I say, wow, that's a legacy of mine. No one will know it, but I'm so proud of that. So anyway, those are the kinds of experiences that I like to think I brought with me to help Councilwoman Rose craft legislation and do other things to serve the people of New York City. And during that time, I was able to become really involved with bar associations in New York. I was president of the Staten Island Women's Bar. Also, I'm very passionate about issues of equity and women's advocacy. And I became involved with an organization called the American Association of University Women, which advocates for equity for women in education and in the workplace. And I became president of the New York State chapter of AAUW, and we did just a lot of advocacy around equity issues. A big equity issue, of course, was paid sick leave that we did a lot of advocacy around.
So Edwina,
helps.
You know, what it comes out to be is you've done everything except take over your husband's show and go to the moon. That's what that means. You've done everything. What haven't you done?
There's so much I haven't done, but
that's only because you don't have enough time.
I'm doing now. What I'm doing now is I am the public administrator of Richmond County. I'm the first woman and the first person of color appointed to that position. And what we do is we oversee the estates of persons who die with no will and no family. And that happens more often than you would think. And a lot of people think that it's mostly people with no means that die that way, but that is actually not the case. For example, one of the largest estates to come into this office was of a man named Roman Bloom, who left an estate close to $40 million, but had no family, or at least at the time. There are now people who have come forward and are in court now, sort of litigating claims to the estate. But while those things are making their way through the court system, we're still administering, the estate of Mr. Bloom. And administering an estate can mean many things. We do research to see if we can find family members to come forward. Sometimes we do a lot of that ourselves, but if it gets very complicated and beyond our resources, we work with genealogists to research if there's any family. We maintain estates, and if there's real property, for example, that can mean, for example, we had a snowstorm in mid-December in New York City. So I needed to make sure that we had someone ready to go and plow the sidewalks, et cetera, in front of those properties. I make sure that the bills are paid, that the taxes are paid. In properties that are in areas where there have been break-ins, I have to get cameras put in to make sure that we enhance security in those properties.
What a lot of people don't understand is a lot of people of
Yeah.
color don't have wills. And then it's just left up in the air. Aretha Franklin was one of those.
Yeah.
Her film comes out later this year.
I think that Prince didn't have a will either.
Yeah.
And
very, very common.
Those are people of substantive means, right? And none of us want to think about dying. That's most people's least favorite subject. Unless you grew up like with my relatives, when we would go to my grandmother's house on Sundays after church for dinner, my aunts and uncles loved to sit around and talk about what they were going to leave to each other.
That's funny. I remember the one conversation my dad had about that. My mom was asking, because I said, I don't want anything. This is anybody, I don't want anything. And he goes, no, I don't want to talk about that. And I never thought he said that.
You think that now, but should that time come when she passes? Not at that moment, because usually we're numbed by grief and it takes a while to work through that process. But like a year, 2 years down the road, you're gonna wake up one day and sort of hit your head and say, why did I not tell my mom I wanted that special vase that I had gotten for her for Mother's Day like 10 years ago? It's funny, these things, they hit you. When my grandmother passed, and she did have a will, but the will mostly addressed her sort of house and stocks and things like that. And, she had all this stuff in her house. And I sew and I crochet. And through the years, I had made lots of stuff for my grandmother. Shawls and, sweaters and hats and scarves. And I'd made, sewn things as well, pillows. And one of my aunts was cleaning out the house, and she like brought a lot of the stuff that I made for my grandmother when she was alive to the house. But this was like a couple of days after she died. And she said, well, what do you want out of this? And at the time I was like, oh, I don't want anything. That was for grandmother. Please, just give it away. And I can't tell you the number of times I've regretted that conversation. So, you might think that now, but the truth is, having those conversations and making them funny, like my aunts and uncles, like they all had wills, like they all like had their plans in place. So, and they made it sort of funny because they would joke, well, I'm getting this, and mama said that she was going to give me that. But they were having those conversations in a funny way while they were alive, instead of fighting with lawyers on each side afterwards. So the grief that you will save yourself and your family, and the money that you will save your family. Because if you have family and you don't have a will, or you're not careful in how you prepare a will, and they end up fighting with lawyers, you can suck away the money out of that estate. Wow. Or even if people own it. So for example, because this is about wealth management as well. you can create a trust. So if you, for some reason, don't trust that your family members will be as prudent as you want them to be, or you're not sure, oh, I don't know what she's going to do with that, you can actually create a trust, which could have someone who administers that trust, and you can really sort of prescribe how that the money or whatever can be used. So there are different ways that you can set up your estate. Right now in New York City and New York State, because every county has a public administrator. In New York City, we're actually city commissioners. And the person dies, no will, maybe some cousins or some relatives who are able to inherit under New York state law. We have a mandatory fee under the law. We have counsel who will become involved. They have a mandatory fee under the law. And then, of course, there are taxes and other things. If you don't create sort of trust and other sort of things to protect the estate. And we work with a genealogist to find this family, and they have a fee. So by the time we find that family and, sort of work with the surrogate court to get a final disposition so that they can get their money, let's say 2 years down the road, thousands of dollars have been siphoned from the value of that estate. Some of them are unavoidable, certain, the taxes and other things. But the fee for us and for our counsel, et cetera, those are things that are avoidable. And, these are the types of things that lead to a huge wealth gap in our country that we find in communities of color and low-income communities. And these are the types of things that we can avoid. Future planning is protecting your family and your community by maintaining wealth within the community.
So does that mean when I get on my
answer?
No. I like what you said, because people need to understand why you need to have these services and what these fees are. Better to do it ahead than to be sacrificed like a sacrificial lamb afterwards. And the thing I was going to say is, I have to go through you, even though you're in Long Island and I'm on the West Coast. I like what I hear.
Staten Island, by the way. Staten Island, not Long Island.
Oh, Staten Island. That's right.
Island.
I could get into a war with that. Yes, exactly. But it's one of those things where I like what I hear, and it is being, if you can identify that and relate to that, those are the people that you want to hire at that point. And it comes to sort of like I'm hearing like a word of mouth. I'm like, I want that person. I like what she's saying. I don't care where she is around the world, because I could relate to what she's talking about. That's what I like to have. So I have a feeling I'm using you.
Well, thank you.
I know I don't have a feeling.
Well, right now I'm a public servant, so I can't provide services myself.
I don't care. I don't care. You would be someone that you would know that I trust the judgment. How about this? Eileen Shapiro.
Thank you.
Calls you funny and wonderful to be around.
Oh, that's so sweet of her.
Well, I adore
very
Eileen.
Sweet of her. I returned the compliment. I spoke with her for the profile she did of me, and we just chatted probably for 90 minutes, and far longer than I'm sure she had anticipated, because it was just fun, sort of meeting each other and talking about life.
Well, that's most important these days, because I tell people, and I'm very blunt and honest with them, because your life depends on what I can help to create for you. You're here today, but you may not be here tomorrow. But you know what? I want to make sure that you are here today and tomorrow. That's my purpose on planet Earth. Is, as you said, I always say this: leave them better than when you found them. And you alluded to a little bit of that in a different slogan, but it's the same thing. And that's very, very important. I was reminded.
It's very important.
That, one of my co-hosts, who was like my father figure, he passed away today. And I just said, wow, this happened today on Martin Luther King Jr.'s day.
Oh.
I didn't remember that. Maybe it just went out. And I haven't had a lot of people that affected me, but he affected me because he took a chance on me. And he always said, you have to help all these other people. And so that's why I do what I'm doing. And having all
yeah.
It's very, very important.
Loss.
Well, yeah, and I didn't think about it until I'm like, wow, I didn't realize it was today. When you think of today, what does Martin Luther King Jr. mean to you? Because I had the honor of interviewing her, Coretta, by accident. I was not supposed to get this interview. And then someone from CNN said, I was at another hotel, I was doing a junket, and it was called the Hotel Nico in Beverly Hills, and it was at the Four Seasons. And then I'll never forget, this guy, Andy Culpepper, who was their film critic, he came over to do the interview. He goes, Brian, why aren't you at the Four Seasons talking to Coretta Scott King and Martin Luther King Jr.? I'm like, what? And they're like, yes, it's called Our Friend Martin. And it was an animated version of Martin Luther King for kids. I go, really? I jumped in the nearest taxi, went over there, barged in and said, I need to do this interview. And there was nobody of color there. There was only 10 outlets. Because I knew who the 10 were. I'm like, and I was the smallest one. I'm like, and then I'm sitting down and I'm like, wow, I'm in front of Coretta Scott King, and there's Ed Asner here, and the guy who played Urkel, and then Martin Luther King Jr., the third. And I was like, wow. And I'm like, I should not have been there. So that's why I always say yes to everybody, because you never know. And I wasn't, and they just said, sure, we have room for one more person, because normally they would have said, no, you're not on the list. We can't have you. Sorry.
So what does this day mean to me? He represents hope, eternal hope in the face of dreadful adversity. And I think that's what's so important about his life, the meaning of his life, his preaching, why it was so important that today became a holiday, and why so important that we recognize it every year. He fought for equity, for equality. He fought against poverty. He started the Poor People's Campaign. That legacy exists today. He said that it's always the right time to do the right thing. People will say to you, oh, don't do that now.
I know.
Wait until it's your time, and wait until it's easier. There are a million reasons not to, but if it's right, then it's always the right time. Even if it's not popular, even if it's not easy. And as he showed with his life, even if it puts you in harm's way.
Exactly. Talk about these Staten Island soirees that you do. What is that about?
Soirees that I do? Do you mean our summer party?
Yes. I've heard about them. I didn't know who was putting them on.
Well, when we're able to safely gather again, and you're in the New York City area or even on the East Coast, we hope you can come by. We do it in August.
Oh, no. And, I'm coming now. I'm coming. I got 13 co-hosts. No, I've heard about these parties that you guys put on. I was like, I have never been to one, but I'm going now.
We pick a theme, for each party. One year was a luau, for example. One year it was Mardi Gras, and we decorate the house, in the theme, and we get, for Mardi Gras, I got beads, purple and pink and pearl long beads for women. For men, I got fedoras and fun glasses. Although I didn't want to be so gender specific. So, you know, I would try to get the men to wear the beads as well and the women to wear the fedoras. And, you know, we barbecue and have lots of food and have lots of fun, I hope.
No, I like that. I mean,
for our next one, we want to hire a musician to sort of play while it's going on. Right now, we just have music going on that we pick ourselves, but that's sort of the.
yeah. What would you say? What would your words of inspiration be for people who are having a hard time right now? Today,
You froze.
oh, what would you
I don't
say?
know if it's
What would you
mine or
say?
yours.
Yes, I think it's on my side. What would you say for those people who need inspiration? What would you say?
Oh, okay. So can you repeat that, because you froze, so I didn't hear the question.
Oh, what would you say for those people who need inspiration to what they're going through today? What would you say to them? What would your words of hope be?
Today, a lot of people are perhaps afraid to lose their apartment, or their house. They may not be working, or they might be working in a job where they have to go out and they're fearful of being exposed to COVID at a time when getting access to a vaccine is not easy right now.
Yeah.
And, you know, people are worried about the vaccine.
Yeah.
So I would say that words of hope are to stay connected with whatever makes you happy and gives meaning to your life in whatever way you can. And that can help to keep you grounded and to give you hope. I have been there. You know, there are times when, you know, I have been afraid of many things, and, you know, have been in work situations that were not wonderful. And what helped for me was, number one, keeping my connection to my family and my close friends. And it's very easy when you're working. I was at law firms for a number of years, and even, you know, whatever job you have, if it's demanding, if it's intense, it's very easy to lose touch with people. But it's those connections that will sustain you through the difficult times. Even if you're, you know, my older sister has to isolate in place. She lives in the UK. She has diabetes. She really can't be around people. Her jobs, and she's in the creative field, allow her and give her the freedom to work from home for the most part. Yeah. So, you know, she's in a good situation in many ways, but that can be very lonely. And there are fears that come with that. And, you know, so she has worked really hard to make sure she maintains her connections, talking to people, Zooming with people, FaceTiming with people, etc. And that can also sort of help you more in practical ways. For example, at a time when I was sort of looking for a job, and wanted to get into the public interest field and was having a hard time, it was through a friend that I, you know, stayed in touch with because she was a good friend, who helped connect me with what ultimately, you know, has led to many wonderful things in my life. And it's just because I happened to be on my computer one morning, and she like instant messaged me and, you know, said, "Hey, what's going on? What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I have an interview with such and such, and I'm really excited about it." And she instantly wrote back and said, "Wait, you're looking for a job? I know the perfect job for you. You know, send me your resume." So don't be afraid to let people see some of your vulnerabilities. A lot of people don't want to say, "I'm looking for a job," or, you know, whatever, because they feel like it makes them look vulnerable, look unsuccessful, etc. But putting up a facade can keep you from finding, the better situation for you. So being honest really does help you. You might not want to go to, the person you work for and say, I don't like being here. Don't be that honest.
You know what I always tell them? If you don't tell me, how's the universe supposed to know?
Exactly.
And then I say this, some people don't like it. I go, your life depends on how everything is going these days. Literally, we're in the pandemic, and it's bad that you have to remind people that. And there's a lot of us that truly want to help people, and that's why I say it like that. I say it like that because I care, and you don't know who I may know who you need to meet. That's why I say it like that.
Exactly. You never know where the opportunity may pop up. And that's why, you need to always, sort of listen and be attuned to things and stay connected with people who, for all you know, might help connect you with the next best opportunity.
Absolutely. Now, you can't get out of here. You can't leave Movie Reviews and More unless you come up with a couple movies that you liked, because we're all locked down. Well, I have to do this all the time anyhow. Do you have a couple favorite films that you were watching? Maybe people, maybe Mickey interviewed someone that you always wanted to meet. Do you have any of those?
Well, I'll say that my favorite film of the holiday season was Jingle Jangle.
Yes.
I think that was on Netflix.
Yep.
Absolutely beautiful and incredible, and maybe my new holiday favorite. There's some films that I will always love, such as West Side Story. I grew up in a family that loved musicals, including both of my brothers who were big burly football players. But we all loved music and could sing, all the songs to Oklahoma and,
Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Oh my goodness, one of my favorites. So I love a lot of musicals. Trying to think of other films I love. Really, West Side Story is one of my all-time favorites.
Well, you'll be in luck.
Yeah, so
by the end of the year, Steven Spielberg's West Side Story will be coming out.
yes. I also was very lucky because the last play that I saw on Broadway in February was West Side Story. It was a brilliant production with an incredible cast of young people from Juilliard. And I dearly hope that when Broadway does reopen, hopefully later this year, that show will be able to come back, because I know that there are some that have started to announce that they aren't. And it's it was so good. It I when I left, I said, I'm not sure what I can see next, because there are very few things that can, seen Hamilton a couple of times, so another brilliant show. And Moulin Rouge, we saw not last fall, but in 2019, we saw Moulin Rouge on Halloween.
Wow.
And we actually were scheduled to go again this past fall, but of course didn't, because things were closed due to the pandemic. So if you get to New York, once things open up again and are able to see any of those productions, they are incredible.
Well, and that's the whole thing. I love musicals myself. I mean, Mary Poppins, was one of them. American in Paris. I was fortunate enough to meet Donald O'Connor and that great dance scenes.
Oh!
Those things I grew up on that in home video, and then getting the chance to meet some of them. These people aren't around anymore. So I always tell people, there's never a bad movie that you can't just bring out and lighten your day, just like there's never a bad CD or album or cassette tape or even 8-track tape that you can't bring out and just memories just come back and a smile will come to your face. And that's the good thing. And so I'm going to leave with that, Edwina, because I got to have you back because Sherry's going to want to talk with you from British Columbia and Jessica's going to want to talk to you from, Franklin, Tennessee. If you see someone without a smile, please give them one of yours because the world needs it. I'm Brian Sebastian.
Thank you. It was so great to visit with you, Brian, and speak with you. And so I look forward to being able to again. Thank you.
Oh, yes, we will. Exactly. And again, like I said, if you see someone without a smile, please give them one of yours because the world needs it.
Thank you.